Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness webinar series as we kick off the 2021 year. This is actually also a very special month because this is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So this month, we have actually two presentations that we're excited to bring you as a part of the webinar series. And as you can see here on our opening slide, we have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who is going to be presenting on online safety, trends, and resources. Within this presentation is excellent information that you want to make sure and share. We're really excited to have Belinda Swan, NCMEC's Outreach Manager, here with us today. Go ahead and go to the next slide. As a couple things, just housekeeping before we get started, please do mute your mics. And we would love to know who's joining us today. So please add your name or your school district or your ESC or any other organization that you're with in the chat so that we can see who's here with us today. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And just as a reminder, this is a part of a webinar series that is brought to you in collaboration with the Office of the Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team, Region 14's Title IV initiative, Region 12, as well as numerous other stakeholders that are working together in partnership to build awareness, resources, and tools to support schools in understanding human trafficking. And so as a part of this collaboration and coordinated work, we have this webinar series that is the first Friday of every month from 10:30 to 11:30. So please do share with your networks. We're excited at the end of the month on the 29th, we will actually have the Office of the Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team providing a trauma of trafficking youth panel where those that have experienced trafficking will be sharing. And so you don't want to miss that. Please do share with your networks. And all of this information is recorded and posted on our website as well. If you don't get a chance or there's other folks that you would like to share this with, please do continue to communicate this information. Also, next month in February, February 5th, we will be having the Department of Family Protective Services give us CPS 101. Basics of mandatory reporting, what happens when a report is made. So again, you don't want to miss that. Make sure and bookmark that on your calendar. One thing I also wanted to note is that we released a To the Administrator letter on December 17th. So this was right before the break. It's on human trafficking, prevention and awareness, and mandatory reporting. And this really gets into new requirements for school board members, superintendents, educators, and the training requirements that are there, as well as mandatory reporting, the resources that are available, and a new child abuse toolkit that we've created in collaboration with the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas as well. So you definitely want to see, go check out that To the Administrator letter, share it within your district, your community. It is in the chat and so available for you, and there's lots of good links there. Please go ahead and go to the next slide. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Belinda, who will be leading our presentation today. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here. As mentioned, my name is Belinda Swan, and I am an outreach manager with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Before we get started, I'd like to commend each of you for taking the time to devote to this topic. I encourage you to attend all of the additional sessions from Kelly's description. They sound absolutely amazing and will certainly inform your ability to recognize and address some of these issues. And I'm really excited to be here today. Before we get started, I'd like to, for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded in 1984 by John and Reve Walsh. Now, the reason behind the founding of our organization is a sad one, but essentially the Walsh family, who you may know from America's Most Wanted and a lot of their work on the ID network, they have just taken their personal tragedy and informed it, turned it into a positive so that they could help as many families avoid similar fate. Essentially, their 6-year-old son, Adam, was abducted a Sears department store in 1984, or before that, prior. He was 6 years old, and unfortunately was later found to have been murdered. And so again, the Walsh family took that pain and that tragedy and turned it into, some 30, 40 years later, this amazing organization that has deep roots and connections in the community. Some of the ways you may have heard of us, we have certainly staked our claim in American pop culture with our missing children posters wherever you go, whether it's a big box store like Walmart or Target or Old Navy. We have partnerships with each of those. You've seen our missing posters, of course, in various law enforcement locations. They used to be behind milk cartons several decades ago. We also have age progression experts who you may have seen featured on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, the newest iteration of that program. And so while we're known for a lot of those news grabbing things, what you may not know is that we also are heavily engaged in prevention methods and so sorry, my mind is like, prevention efforts is the word I was looking for, throughout the country, if not the world. Some of our leaders also have traveled to India and other countries to try to bring the same message of hope throughout the country and throughout the world. And so as you can see on your screen, our mission is to find missing children, reduce child sexual exploitation, and to prevent future victimization. Our tagline is "Hope is why we're here." And it's more than a tagline for us. It's more than the t-shirt that I'm wearing. We are here because we do believe that there is hope. It is never too late. It is never too early to talk to your students, the children in your lives about some of the topics we're going to talk about today. And so I'd like to start by discussing with you the cyber tip line. Our cyber tip line is what we refer internally as our nerve center. It is a national clearinghouse for any and every person, whether you work in law enforcement, whether you're a concerned adult who has a child in your care, an educator, etc. You can call on us any day of the year, at any time, in any language. I assure you, if there is a language, there's a family in your district or at your school, and they need help in a particular language, and we just so happen to not have someone on call who speaks it, we'll find someone immediately. We are committed to making sure that everyone who needs our help receives our help. So again, our cyber tip line can be accessed at any time. You can reach us via 1-800-THE-LOST or cybertipline.org to report what you may feel is, some sort of crime committed against a child, or if you just need to speak to someone about finding potential resources. And again, we'll talk about those in depth here in a minute. So because it is our central nervous system at our organization, everything that we receive in the tip line is analyzed and then informs our presentation, such as the one today. So everything that you're going to hear about today is based on information that we're receiving in real time via our cyber tip line and 1-800-THE-LOST. Note here that in 2019, our tip line received 16.9 million reports. Keep that number in mind as we discuss how things have changed during the time of COVID. Now, of these reports, 69.1 million images, videos, and other files related to child sexual exploitation were reported. Pretty startling numbers, but not surprising when you think about just how pervasive smart technology has become in our society. So again, as I mentioned, we want to keep those numbers in mind as we think about how things have changed via COVID. Since that, the country has largely been on some form of virtual learning or lockdown. NCMEC has experienced an over 63% increase in cyber tip line reports between January and September versus the same time period last year. Pretty startling. What's more startling is that of those reports, of that increase, we've seen an over 98% increase in online enticement reports between that same time period. And so I'll share this information, as you can see on the screen. Obviously, both children and adults are spending more time. And with that, we are aware, NCMEC is certainly aware. As I mentioned, we have various divisions, such as our exploited children division, our missing children division. So all of our analysts, all of our connections with law enforcement, unfortunately, I'll share, and we are going to talk about some things that may be a little uncomfortable, but I feel it's worth being uncomfortable for a few minutes so that we all walk away with a greater understanding of the issues at hand. But there was chatter at the beginning of lockdowns, and it continues on the dark web, which we do monitor by, quite frankly, predators and pedophiles who essentially saw COVID as an opportunity to be able to cast a wider net on children, especially our most vulnerable. And what am I talking about when I say most vulnerable? Those are our children who may have to learn remotely, but whose parents still have to go to work, who are maybe a little older, maybe in middle school and having to watch over their younger siblings who are in elementary school, but because of no fault of their family, their parents are trying to work, are at home alone. So these predators are chatting on the dark web about all the ways that they can exploit our children. And it is indicated in this disturbing increase in online enticement reports that we've seen since COVID has affected our economy and our society, to be quite frank. So I know that can seem a little dark, a little overwhelming, but again, hope is why we're here. And so today we're going to talk about some particular safety and security issues, ways that we can recognize them, understand them, and help to prevent them and address them in the instance that they have already happened. And so what are those issues? Inappropriate content, online privacy, sexting, online enticement, as I've mentioned, which is increasingly important to understand, cyberbullying, and gaming safely. We'll get into that in more detail, but I want you to start to think about that, especially as we come back from holiday break, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else and have purchased more video gaming equipment. I don't even think that's what kids call it anymore because they're not technically video games. They've purchased them online. All of my nieces and nephews wanted gift cards so that they could reload games on Nintendo Switch or PlayStation, and so the culture's changing and kids are finding ways to become more connected in different ways, and we need to make sure that we understand how that's happening. And you're going to walk away from today's presentation with more of that understanding. So another thing I want to point out, though, is although this does seem overwhelming, as I mentioned, never too early and never too late to start to talk about these issues. We can talk about these risks at every age, and I'm going to provide you with some help and some tips on how best to do that at every age. So with our younger children, I'm talking, K through 5, K through 2 especially, we can talk about netiquette, which obviously is a play on words, the internet and etiquette. We can make sure that kids start to understand and create a foundation about how best to interact with one another. That's especially important as a lot of our children are virtual, my kindergartner included. We can help our educators by making sure that we're informing our children how best to treat one another in that instance where our teachers need to turn their backs and help as our daughter's teacher calls them, her roomers and her Zoomers, right? And so she'll turn her back to address her roomers, and her Zoomers are left to interact with each other on the screen. We can help our educators by making sure that our children know how best to conduct themselves online at even kindergarten level. We can talk about looking at inappropriate content and what that means. Pop-ups and passwords, especially at this age range, because that can absolutely turn into a $2,000 bill on your Amazon account and some other hacking and pervasive things that can happen as well. And of course, we can start having those conversations about not trusting everyone you meet online. Absolutely appropriate to talk to our littles about that. Those conversations, once they've happened at the younger age, can transition into more nuanced and difficult conversations about topics such as cyberbullying, which we'll discuss, sexting, posting personal and inappropriate information, and meeting offline. So again, the takeaway from this slide is that it's never too early and never too late to start to discuss these topics. So again, as we mentioned, inappropriate content, it can seem a little daunting to even start to think about how we can discuss these issues with our smaller children. But one of the ways that I would encourage you to be able to have these conversations with younger children is to simply say, you definitely don't need to have a conversation and say pornography and excessive violence. With our younger children, all you have to say is, look, you can come to me as your trusted adult, and we'll talk about why we use the term trusted adult here in a second, but you can come to me if you are online and you see anything that makes you feel icky, if it makes you feel scared, if something inside of you makes you think this is wrong, you can come to me and talk to me about that. It's that simple. You don't need to get into all of the particulars about what pornography is and what violence is and what hate speech is and risky or illegal behaviors. We can certainly have those conversations as our children grow older, but for our younger kids, it's that simple. Simply make sure that they understand that you are a safe place for them, and that if they see or feel any particular, emotion that just doesn't sit right with them. I say icky. That resonates well with the littles from my experience. The light will flicker on and they'll say, oh, okay, well, so when I see this or I hear this, now the consequence for that is my 5-year-old, now everything is icky, and she comes, Mom, is this icky? Is this gross? But that's okay, because I know that we are laying a foundation for these more difficult conversations when she starts to become a teenager, and a tween, especially when that very, very critical time in a child's life where we may lose the ability to communicate with them effectively. So how do we respond? And I know that I'm talking to a group of seasoned professionals, years in the field, tons of practice, but I think it's worth stating this again. We have to remember that the first time a child comes to you to discuss one of these things, if you've already laid the foundation and you've spent countless hours reinforcing all of the things that they should do when they encounter an issue, quite frankly, we can blow it if we don't react appropriately that very first time that they come to us. So we've got to make sure that we don't frighten them. Folks, we've got to take that deep breath. I'm a parent. I understand. Mama Bear wants to come out. A child, my child has been hurt. A child has been hurt. Who are they? Where are they? I want to know what happened. That approach can scare the child and make them feel that they cannot come to us again in the future. So take that deep breath. Don't frighten them. Listen attentively and stay calm. Believe me, I know that's hard. Tell them it's not their fault. Answer their questions, and you can absolutely include them in the reporting process, especially for our littles. It gives them a sense of responsibility and a sense of closure, just as adults need to feel that we have a hand in addressing the things that have gone wrong in our lives or situations that could have gone better. Kids want that too. They simply don't have the way, perhaps the vocabulary to express those emotions. And again, I know I'm talking to a room of professionals, but it's worth repeating and reinforcing that we've got to make sure that we remain calm in this situation so that all of the hard work that we've done to make sure that they understand they can come to us is not lost. So with our older children especially, but even our youngsters, we can make sure that they understand what they can do, right? So again, I know that we're talking about students in a lot of these instances, and it may not be entirely appropriate, or you may not have the opportunity to have these kinds of conversations, but I implore you to please try to include this in your discussions with your students, especially if they are learning virtually, especially if they've been given some sort of technology, whether they're in the classroom or at home. It's important that they know what to do with that technology. Know what to do when they do see that thing that makes them feel icky. We've got to make sure we make assumptions sometimes about the things that our kids do and don't understand it. And we've got to, whether they know it or not, they have to hear us say it, right? So we can encourage them to turn off the screen, use the back button, locate that back button with the kiddos, make sure they understand where that back button is. Hey, look, I'm 42, I get a new phone, I have to relearn the thing like 10 times before I figure it out. So we can't assume that our kids, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, know exactly what to do and where to go. Reinforce that they should tell a trusted adult. Now, I'll be honest, we've received some pushback, different presentations throughout the state. Parents will come up to us afterwards and say, now, why are you saying trusted adult and not parent? I want my child to come to me, and you're telling them not to come to me. I'll be very blunt with you. This is the answer we give them, because a lot of times the perpetrator is the parent. And we never, ever want to make a child victim feel that they have nowhere to go. We never want to reinforce that, the only person you can tell is the person who's harming you. So is it a dark response? Yes. But is it based on truth? Absolutely. So we say tell a trusted adult, and you certainly are in a position to be that trusted adult. You can report it to the website or apps that they're specifically using. So if it's, YouTube for kids, which is horrible, or if it's, any one of these video games or gaming platforms, or if it's a social media app that they've been allowed to utilize, they can first report it there. Each and every one of these has a mechanism for reporting, and of course, report it to the CYBERTIPLINE. And we'll discuss the CYBERTIPLINE in more depth in a second. So as our children become older, and they do, and our students have the ability to post and to have their own social media accounts, it's very important that we also discuss with them inappropriate or illegal behavior, offensive language. Now we can start calling things by their name, right? While we just identified emotions when they were younger, we can now actually identify these things more clearly with our older students. And I recommend this around, fifth and up. And we can talk about that in a second as well. So threats of violence, underage drinking or drug use, and hate speech. So what's one of the best ways that you can illustrate this concept for our kids who may or may not be, willing to digest the information? Quick and easy. Pull something from the headlines, and you can find 10, 20, 50, 100 examples of a kid who worked so hard, did the internship, got the good grades, did all of the extracurriculars, went to parties, that did something stupid, got, caught online, and all of that's gone. They posted some offensive language. Certainly lots of examples of that in the past couple of years, where kids have gone on TikTok and said just absolutely disgusting things, and then have been so surprised when the college they've been accepted to has rescinded that application letter, right? So what works best with kids, especially our younger tweens and teens, is to pull examples. And they still may push back a little and say, well, I'm not that dumb, that's not going to happen to me. Well, are you fully aware of all of the things that your friends post? Do you know what your friends do, or even some family members, right? Once they've taken that picture, do you have access to their accounts? The answer is no, right? So those are ways where you can kind of really get some shock value and then start a more nuanced conversation about what these things mean. So again, to wrap up this particular section of the presentation, what can we do? We can connect with our children and start to establish that foundation. We can learn about all of the things that they're doing online, most certainly, especially if your district is, giving technology to children. It's important to have a learning component involved, right? Both for your educators and for your students, so that there's a common language that you can use to identify and recognize and prevent some of these issues. Absolutely engage, right? It shouldn't just be a one-off conversation. We should have regular check-ins with our children, especially with our children who are learning virtually, to make sure that they understand that you meant what you said when you connected with them and said, I am that trusted adult. You can come, you can talk to me. Shouldn't just be a one-time conversation. We've got to foster that trust as well. So in our next section, we're going to talk about online privacy. Again, some of these conversations we assume parents or guardians are having with our students. And, I'm here to tell you, based on experience, that's not the case, right? For every parent who is having this conversation, there are tons more who, for whatever reason, simply are not. And that's not a judgment whatsoever. I'm guilty as well. We make assumptions about, what our kids do or don't understand. So what are some issues that are relevant with regard to online privacy? Obviously, what's okay and what's not okay. We may not be in a position to make those judgment calls for the students and the children in our care, but we can certainly discuss with them that pictures of family and friends, those should come with some permission, right? Not only perhaps of the people in the picture, but from your guardian. Is it okay to post this picture? Do I have permission to engage in this way? Personal information is never okay to share online. Conversations with unknown people in an online game. This is a tough one. Every gaming console is just 2 clicks away from being able to connect with a complete stranger across the world. And I'll share some more devastating examples once we get into that section of the presentation, but something to keep in mind with regard to online privacy. I don't think kids fully understand that their privacy is at risk when they're playing a game with a stranger. In that moment, it seems fun and perfectly normal, but there can be some pretty devastating long-term consequences, and we'll discuss those in a second. Creating videos on streaming services, this is a big one. It's especially hard to get this concept across to our kids, when their parents are participating in the TikTok videos too. But there's 2 sides to that. One, the parent is involved, right, and knows what their kids are doing. And 2, the flip side to that is that the child may take more liberties with that, whether it's explicit or not, or implied or not, permission, right? So we've got to have talks with what's okay and the consequences of posting some of these videos online. checking in or sharing current location online. So I'll share a little bit about my background. I previously worked for the Texas Attorney General's office, where I was assigned to the cybercrimes unit, and that's how I got to know NCMEC. I would receive and process tips from the CYBERTIPLINE that were intended for Texas. And that's one of the things that the CYBERTIPLINE folks do, right? They'll receive these tips, do the legwork, and then share those with the appropriate law enforcement entities. So I would receive these had horrible videos, images, and I'd look for clues and tips and ways that we could package this in a case file for our officers to start issuing warrants, et cetera, et cetera. So checking in and sharing current locations online, our adults do it too, right? Certainly saw a lot of cases where adults went on vacation and we're having just a lovely time, and we're posting in real time and checking in. We're having dinner here, we're there, and then so surprised when they came home and their house had been broken into. Again, I'm a woman of a certain age, grew up listening to various types of music. And so this week in the news, a famous rapper, Dr. Dre, was, in the hospital with a brain aneurysm. And one of the follow-up news stories was that because it was so, it was, in the media, everyone knew that he was sick. Folks tried to break into his house. So, there is that downside to being so transparent online. It affects all of us. If it can affect a billionaire, it certainly can affect us, right? So, but, obviously his home is probably a little bit harder to get into. So if we're not being mindful, certainly our kids are not being mindful. So we have to have that discussion as well. Obviously, we've got to talk to them about sending, viewing, and sharing explicit or provocative pictures, and I'll give you some tips about how to have those conversations as well. Again, just wanted to point out some different topics that fall under the topic of online privacy. Personal information, this is a very easy one to address with kids. Obviously, it's passwords, your home address, location, as we discussed, home and cell phone number, and email address. Again, kids are, for whatever reason, whether it's that separation that the screen provides, whether it's on their phone or their tablet or their laptop, for whatever reason, and some adults as well, we tend to let all caution go, and we'll share all of this type of information. So one way that I have found to connect with children about this topic is to say, look, imagine you're at the store, you're at the grocery store, you're movie theater, you're in line, whatever, and some strange person taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, can I have your address? Where do you live? Can you share that password with me? Or what's your phone number? Can I have your email address? And the kids will say, well, I would say that's weird and say, no, get away from me. And I'd go tell somebody. Okay, cool. So why are you doing that online? It's the same concept. So what's important to understand throughout this presentation is that for whatever reason, there is a disconnect between our children's understanding of their online persona and their in-person persona. We have to work hard to make sure that they understand that everything they do, good and bad, online is simply an extension of who they are in real life. So some of the risks that we can share and understand when we're talking about these things with our students, obviously identity theft and online scams and hacking, right? A lot of this happens with our youngsters. Plenty of real world examples about kiddos who have ordered thousands of dollars of toys and other things without their parents knowing. Easy way to do that, set that password, right? Online enticement and sextortion are certainly more serious risks of sharing personal information. Talk about that in the coming sections. So what can we do? We never, at NCMEC, we never want to just throw all of this information at you and walk away. We want to provide you with tools. Again, we may not be in a position, but if kiddos are utilizing district issued equipment, we can certainly have these kinds of discussions. We can establish rules about what they can share online. We can learn about reporting options together, have a common language about how to report and to whom. We can help them set those privacy settings. We can help them create strong passwords, and we can talk about their friends list, or at least introduce the topic and say, if you're doing these kinds of things, you need to know who is following you and who you're following. You can at least introduce the topic. So let's go into sexting. As I said, as I mentioned earlier, we delve a little deeper into some of these uncomfortable topics, but nonetheless, it's got to be addressed. And I'll tell you why. So obviously, sexting, or maybe not so obviously, the definition is sending or posting nude or partially nude images. Recent research suggests that 15% of teens have sexted, 27% say that they've received a sext. I'm here to tell you that these numbers are low because these are simply the kiddos who were brave enough to admit, right? And I'll share with you a link to a study that was released over the summer at the Dallas Crimes Against Children conference, which if you can attend in some way in the coming years, I highly suggest that you do. NCMEC has a large presence there. We talk about a lot of trends. Experts from a variety of fields in keeping children safe are in attendance and present. And the Thorn Group, who they work very hard to develop research where other groups may not have the resources the Thorn organization absolutely does. And then they share their research with groups such as ours. And so the study that they released in August, they actually were able to have close interaction with children. And they found that not only are more and more children sexting and sharing videos and images, the kids who are doing it are increasingly younger. Is that shocking? Maybe on its face. And I'll share with you again, I'm 42, so half of my life, I recognize I have a blind spot. And I think we need to take some time to recognize that as well when we start to talk about these uncomfortable issues. I have a blind spot. Half of my life, I lived without smart technology. I remember breaking down with girlfriends coming home from Corpus Christi at a movie and being stuck. No cell phone, no payphone, praying that a serial killer didn't stop to try to help us, right? So I still problem solve in those terms. Our children today do not. Everything that they do has some sort of online component. So we've got to focus less on judgment and try to empathize and understand this very new worldview, because it's not changing. It's only going to become more pervasive. So what did the Thorn study say? The Thorn study said that children as young as 8 and 9 are sexting. And if they're not producing content, they're certainly sharing the content. Why is that? Let's think about that. Christmas. Did you give a smart device to a child? How old are they? Do the kids in your lives have smartphones? Do they have an iPad? Do they have a Kindle? All of these kinds of things. As kids become younger or they gain access at a younger age, they also gain access and understanding of some of these behaviors as well. So again, when we remove those blinders, we try to look at these situations with empathy and understanding and with simple logic. It's not hard to understand why this is trending younger and younger. The other thing I want to share from you that came from that study is that a lot of these children didn't see any fault in sharing these images. As a matter of fact, some that were interviewed said things like, well, I didn't take the picture and I'm not in the picture, so I didn't do anything wrong. It's not my fault. So there's that desensitizing and that kind of removal from the fact that this is actually production of child sexual abuse material and that they were re-victimizing the victim. Do they understand that? Probably not, because no one has explained it to them before. So this is an excellent opportunity for all of us as trusted adults to start having these conversations. So again, this research is certainly accurate, but it is not truly indicative of the real numbers, because again, not every child is willing to admit to it. So why are they sexting? We've touched on this already. Certainly for all of the reasons that kids have made inappropriate jokes throughout time, right? Or have done things to experiment with their sexuality, with their sense of self throughout time. What has changed? Their access to smart technology. So again, we've got to remove those blinders, start being less judgmental and asking why and being so hard on our children and trying to understand so that we can work at these issues together. So they're certainly doing it to be funny, to impress a crush, peer pressure or threats. And of course, they're experimenting with relationships, sexual behavior, and boundaries. Again, none of these behaviors are new to any of us. What's new is this introduction and easy access to smart technology, which obviously leaves space for much more serious consequences. So I'm going to share a short video with you. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to share that it's only 2 minutes. I want to share this video with you because it is an excellent way to introduce the topic with your students. We also provide a discussion guide to facilitate a more in-depth discussion about this issue. So I'm going to, without further ado, I'll go ahead and play this and we'll discuss in just a second.
You probably get lots of messages every day, but what if you got one like this? What would you do? Would you send a picture? No? Cool. That's an easy way to protect yourself. But what if you'd chosen differently? What if you send the picture? They'd never share it with anyone else, right? Do you want the picture shared with others? Sorry, you no longer have a choice. It's out of your hands now. Because sometimes people we trust break that trust. Maybe the person you sent the picture to shows it to some friends. Maybe they send it to a couple friends, who send it to a couple more friends, you get the idea. It spreads, and you never know who might see it. Your little brother? Your mom? Other people at school?
Seriously? And I would never.
Even strangers could get a hold of your picture. You never really know where that picture will end up.
Look at it.
How long it will be out there? Or what the consequences will be. Don't let others decide what happens to your image. Think before you share. Learn more at netsmarts.org. And hey, if your image is already out there, know that it's not your fault. For information about removing sexual pictures and videos from the internet, visit missingkids.org/gethelpnow.
I'm sorry, I had an internet glitch, so I apologize for that small pause. But I hope that one of the takeaways that you get from viewing that video is just how easy it is to broach the topic. Let us do the heavy lifting for you, right? This video can help start the discussion. It'll help you to be able to cast a wide net of understanding with children. And you can certainly, again, count on our or rely on our discussion guide for follow-up questions. So just tons of ways to discuss this and to inform other parents, however you feel our information or resources best suit your needs. Just an example of some of the things that we can provide for you. So what are some of the consequences of sexting? And before I get started, before I forget, I also want to mention, I hope that you caught that, and we can certainly share that information with you in the chat box related to our cyber tip line. We do have devoted staff and long-standing relationships with internet service providers, with social media networks such as Facebook and Instagram, which are the same company, Snapchat, Google, you name it. We have these long-standing relationships with them, and we work very hard to remove these images from the internet. So if you have a child in your care or a student on campus who is experiencing some of these issues, certainly reach out to us, and we will do everything in our power to not only connect them with free resources such as survivor and victim support, but also with removing those images from the internet. So what are some of the consequences of sexting? Obviously, humiliation. This can quickly turn into a bullying issue, blackmail, school discipline for, based on, did it happen on campus? And I am here to tell you it's absolutely happening on campuses throughout the country. And of course, police involvement. What children don't understand is that regardless if they are a minor or not, when they do this, they are creating child sex abuse material. When they share it, they're distributing child sex abuse material. And so there's that disconnect as well from their guilt and the consequences. Does it scare children enough to tell them, hey, look, you could be arrested for this and charged with a sex crime? Sometimes, not all the time, right? So even with that consequence explained to them, our kids are still participating in this behavior. So what can we do? We can have these conversations. We can talk to them about the consequences. We can tell them we're here to help them if it has already happened, or if they have been made to feel that they have to participate in this behavior. It's an excellent opportunity for us to have discussions with our children about healthy relationships and about reinforcing that anyone who truly has care, concern, or love for them would not make them, force them, or make them feel that they had to do something that they were uncomfortable with. So it's an excellent opportunity to have a lot of difficult conversations about issues that, quite honestly, no one else may be having with these children. So again, addressing sexting, we can talk about these consequences in plain terms. We can tell them to never forward a sexting image and why, right? They are complicit when they hit that forward button. Discuss those healthy relationships, talk about the ways an image can spread online, and that video can certainly help in that effort. And of course, you can always report it to the CYBERTIPLINE. So now we're going to discuss online solicitations, which you've heard continuously throughout this presentation. As I mentioned, working in a cybercrimes unit for the AG's office, I did, unfortunately or fortunately, have lots of experience in seeing what these cases look like. So I'll be rather blunt with you on what those look like. How do they occur? Mostly on social networking sites, right? They occur among older teens, but as I mentioned, as devices are becoming more readily available for younger children, it's starting to happen with younger age categories as well. Most teens are solicited by their peers. So it's not, I think as a society, you know, we are inundated with things like, you know, Dateline. I love Keith Morrison, you know, I'm here to tell you I'm a huge fan, Law and Order, all of those kinds of things. But nonetheless, those are sensationalized cases. The truth of the matter is most teens are solicited by their peers. Most are not bothered by it. Why? Because it looks something like this, right? As the kids say, someone slides into their DMs. What does that mean? Someone messages them, sends them a direct message on one of their social media platforms like Snapchat or Instagram, and says something as simple as, you know, you look really pretty in that picture. What's your name? Where do you go to school? And a lot of times these predators, and I'll be honest with you, in my experience, what we've seen, they do their homework, right? So all of the conversations we've had up until this point during this presentation about online safety, about consequences, they culminate in sometimes these solicitation situations. What am I talking about? Well, a predator or a pedophile will do their homework in that they will study a child's social networking sites to learn about their favorite music, their favorite food, their favorite hobbies, and then the games that they're playing. They'll learn about where they go to school, you know, some of the different things that they do, and they'll use that information to form common ground with the child, especially our vulnerable children, and say, hey, you know, I like that music too, or have you been to such and such restaurant, or I noticed you posted something about XYZ. I love that too. Did you know? So they form a common ground based on what they can find online, based on what the child has posted. They garner their trust, and then slowly but surely they start to introduce those explicit images. Once they've established a level of comfort between predator and child, they'll start asking the child to produce their own content, right? So this is how it happens. It takes time. They're exploiting our children's natural curiosity. They're good at what they do because this is what they do. I don't know how else to state that. It's disturbing, it's scary, but we've got to understand the problem so that we can help to prevent it and address it. So once they've done this, they've established trust, they've introduced the images, now they were able to get the child to produce their own. That's when the real trouble starts, right? They'll start to use their adult status behavior to control the child. Simple as, you know, well, I have these pictures, I know where you go to school, I know where you work, I know where you applied, you know, for college. If you don't continue to provide more, I am going to post them online. I'm going to send them to your parents. I'm going to send them to your, you know, college admissions counselor. I'm going to send them to everyone, right? And so then the child feels obligated to continue. They feel lost. They feel that they can no longer come to their trusted adult, or they don't know that they can come to their trusted adult. They'll maintain this power and control by offering gifts like cell phones and gift cards. You know, 10 or so years ago when I was working at the AG's office, I saw some of these kinds of things. Again, disturbing, but, you know, I'm going to be blunt with you. You know, they would mail things like lingerie, cell phones, gift cards, and all of those kinds of things, and then tell the child, make sure you check the mail before your parents get home. Unfortunately, things have become easier as our society becomes more virtual in nature. Predators can now send e-cards, right, via email and other methods, and so that nothing is coming through the mail. It's more secretive in nature. But these are the ways that they control and maintain that control over our children. I'll share one quick example. I know we're running low on time. One of our partners at the AG's office who presents in conjunction with us shared an example on the gaming platform on Roblox, right? Well, a lot of our kids are playing Roblox, a lot of our students. And so there's a third-party app that you can download to chat with other players. predators have certainly found young boys, especially this way, and have gone through each and every one of these steps to do that. This particular case happened in North Central Texas. Mom just happened to be doing a spot check, found the chat log, found some disturbing images, turned it into the police, and they took over the chat and were able to lure the predator to a restaurant where this person certainly had horrible intentions and arrested him. So that had a good ending in that this perpetrator was arrested and is now in jail, and the children were able to be matched with counseling. Their lives are forever changed, but at least there was, some help in a certain end to the abuse. It's not always happening. So we have to make sure that we understand what it is, however uncomfortable it makes us feel, and be able to identify it as well. So signs of grooming, again, individually, some of these things may look like typical teenage behavior, but when we take them all together, they're certainly indicative of a problem that we need to investigate. So again, we may not have, readily available information about a lot of these things, but as educators, we certainly are involved with the lives of the children that are in our care, right? So you may notice that these children, certainly some of our more vulnerable children, suddenly have access to things that we wouldn't expect, if that's a new cell phone or new expensive shoes or clothing, they're receiving these gifts, they're calling unknown numbers, again, things we may not have readily available information about. But if they're rejecting family and friends, those kiddos who have normally raising their hand in class and are very active and are participating in extracurriculars, they're starting to reject family and friends. They're getting upset when they're not online. You're catching them with their phones when they're not supposed to have them. They're minimizing those screens, flipping over that phone. What's going on? It's time to investigate what's happening. And if this child has become a victim of grooming, or as an extension of grooming, child sexual trafficking as well. I don't think we have enough time, so I'm going to pass on this video, but I will provide you, I have a link to our website, which also has links to all of these presentations and videos. It's our resources tab, and I think we can drop that in the chat box as well. So the intention of this video is to make sure that we all understand. I'd like for you to take a second to think about the victim you envisioned while we've been talking about this. And although I've made some mention of some particular cases, I venture to say that you were probably thinking of a young girl, right? But young men are just as much impacted. They're just less likely to report it for a variety of societal reasons, right? So this video just drives that point home and shares two survivor stories. The key takeaway from one of the stories is and these are based on truth. One of the young men says, "My parents were going through a really bad divorce. I felt alone and scared. I had no one to talk to. I met this person online who I thought was a girl, right? And it was not, met him offline and was assaulted." So the point there is that our young boys also feel emotions, also react to difficult things in their lives, and may be looking for a trusted person and find it in the wrong place. And so that's the point of that video. So I'd like to jump to some of the trends that we're seeing that I've mentioned. Certainly sexting, as I mentioned, younger and younger kids are doing it. Online enticement during the time of COVID, definitely more prevalent. Sextortion, just as we mentioned, once the sexting or enticement has taken place, it turns into I need more or kind of situation. And live streaming. So certainly folks are streaming more and more of their lives via TikTok, fans only, you name it, any one of these more popular social media platforms. I will also tell you, please don't start any of these conversations with the students or children in your care with Facebook. They'll instantly close their ears. Kids aren't on Facebook. And so they'll immediately think that you are disconnected and don't know what you're talking about. Kids are not on Facebook. They are absolutely on Snapchat. They're on TikTok. They're on Instagram, to some degree, Twitter, but not so much. And they're absolutely gaming and they're live streaming on all of those platforms. So things to be aware of. So what can we do after we've talked about all this heavy information? Again, stress those healthy relationships. Talk about the consequences of meeting offline. Share these videos as conversation starters. Make sure that they understand that you can be that trusted adult. Discuss why it's important that they know who is on his or her friends list. A lot of these kids want internet clout. They want more followers. They want to be influencers. They've been conditioned to believe that this is something to strive for. That's not the case. That old cliche of the person posing as a modeling agency, to get kids into the underground life of child sexual trafficking or other nefarious things, it's still happening. It's just now happening, via social media. Talk about the warning signs. If one of these instances has been brought to your attention, absolutely call the police, report it to the cyber tip line. We work very closely with law enforcement. Once you report any of these instances to the cyber tip line, we will make sure that we can get it to the appropriate law enforcement office and make sure that we can help to connect with resources such as counseling and that removal of those images online. Kids are capable, you're capable. Again, we're conditioned by what we see on the news and on popular television, but this is absolutely all that's necessary. You do not need 2 filing cabinets worth of evidence. You don't need video. You don't need any of those things. This is an actual cyber tip. Want to trade, so you can see what it says. She said no, and the perpetrator did it anyway. He sent a photo of his genitalia. She shared it with her trusted adult. They reported it to the social networking site. As I mentioned, we have very long-standing, strong relationships with these social networking sites. They reported it to the cyber tip line. We analyzed it, beefed up the information. We're able to trace the IP address, send it to the law enforcement entity that was had jurisdiction. Bad guy was able to be arrested. That simple, folks. We don't need to stress over whether or not it's worth sending. Just send it. As I said, we're on call 24/7. We can walk you through the process. I do want to state, though, please don't send photos. You can call or omit the actual photos. We don't want to re-victimize, and we certainly don't want to be redistributing that information. Things you can report: anyone who sends a child photos or videos containing obscene content, anyone who asks the child to send sexual images, anyone speaking to a child in a sexual manner. There doesn't have to be photos. There doesn't have to be an invitation to participate or to lure a child. If they're speaking about inappropriate things, such as in a sexual manner, that's worth the report. And absolutely, if anyone asks the child to meet in person, you can report that to the tip line. Again, cybertipline.org and 1-800-THE-LOST if you would like to speak to someone in real time in any language. So we'll talk about cyberbullying next to wrap up our discussion today. Certainly seen an increase. There have been a couple of studies, some researchers in Florida, and I believe in North Carolina. I can get that information for you. They simply did an analysis of keywords associated with cyberbullying on social media platforms during the time of COVID. Certainly saw a spike. We've seen a spike in reports to our cyber tip line as well. It's absolutely makes sense, right? More kids are online, more kids are finding ways to be horrible to each other. So some examples of cyberbullying. The more obvious things, of course, include posting fight videos, but we also need to recognize that it absolutely means sending mean texts. So whether they have been posted online or not, they are utilizing the internet to perpetuate this behavior, and that does fall under cyberbullying. So it doesn't have to be posted online to be considered cyberbullying. Sending mean texts, photoshopping pictures, and creating fake profiles, that is starting to increase. As you may be aware, a lot of these newer smart devices come prepackaged with some form of photo editing software that's pretty advanced, right? And so whether you and I are using it or not, our kids most definitely are. And you can really use some of that software to make some pretty horrible videos that are intended to humiliate a fellow student. Spreading rumors and gossip, posting embarrassing pictures, and of course, sending threatening or harassing comments. I think our minds go to threatening and harassing comments when we think of cyberbullying, but I want to make it clear to everyone listening today that it also includes all of these other topics as well. Of course, the difference between cyberbullying and bullying is that it spreads faster, there's a wider audience, and it follows children home. As a parent, this one breaks my heart. I can remember one kiddo when I was in 1st or 2nd grade who was bullied pretty pervasively. And as a second grader, I knew it was wrong, and I felt horrible. And as an adult, I still think about him and I hope he's well, all of those kinds of things. But I remember even as a youngster thinking, oh man, I hope at least when he gets home, he's safe, right? That's not the case with our kiddos who are being cyberbullied. They don't have respite. All of the things that we expect them to do, research for homework, XYZ, socialize, all of these kinds of things that most of our children are already doing, these kiddos can't do any of it without that crushing anxiety, without that fear of being bullied. That is what differentiates cyberbullying from bullying, and that's why it absolutely garners our attention and our ability to recognize it and address it. This next story, we have just a few minutes, but I am going to share. It's very short. It's especially impactful with adults because it is from the perspective of a child. He won a contest to describe his online or his interaction with social media, and he does it so well by a spoken word. It's only about a minute or so long, so I'm going to go ahead and share that now, and then we'll wrap up and take some time for questions.
This is a line, and this line is mine. You will kindly find my feet and my spine are perfectly aligned. You'll also find that on either side is a plus and a minus sign. Right now I'm on this line, minus this, now I'm online. This is a line, and this line is mine. You will kindly find my feet and spine are on the plus sign. Now I'd like to assign and also define what one might find on this side of the line. I will not pretend that there are no consequences of saying something offensive online, no matter what my ignorant friend says. Because words are all I have, and yeah, I know it's sad we hide behind the mask of the latest social networking fad. So there's respect in my status, whether through Mark Zuckerberg or Tom, and I'll treat you the same in person, and yeah, I'll accept your friend request, Mom. This is a line, and this line is mine. You will kindly find my feet and my spine are on the minus sign. Now I'd like to assign and also define what one might find on this side of the line. Now I might seem unassuming, but if you only knew what I was doing, brewing, spewing, spitting venom when I'm at that screen, I ruin. Reputations I will splatter, typing faster I get madder, all the insults I will gather, you're so lucky it's only sadder. Day. You have one day, oh yes, Sunday, for my words to die away. And on that one day, oh, I must say, you're gonna wish you had a different name. But then it's Monday, and at school, I'll remind them all of what I said. Then it's Tuesday, and then it's Wednesday, and then we'll all find out you're dead. This is a line, and this line is mine. And now that I've assigned what one might find on either side, you will kindly find that my feet and my spine are on the plus sign. And I'm not moving. Where are you?
Yeah, I think it's easy to see why this young man won that contest, and it certainly speaks to the duality that our children encounter. Their in-person persona, who they are online, and I venture to add a third layer, right? That online persona that they have facing their family or their trusted adults, and who they are when no one else is looking, or when they think no one else is looking. And so what are the three different kind of layers to cyberbullying? Obviously the actual bully, the victim, and the bystander. Any child at any time, can be either one of these and is impacted just as much as the other in a variety of ways. And so how can we recognize a cyberbullying victim? This is key to understanding all of our children are hyper-connected. If they don't have as much interest, right, especially some of our more vulnerable children who may only have access via school issued devices or at school, and they want no part of it, what's happening, what's going on, it's worth a conversation. They're acting nervous when they receive those kinds of notifications or are given online assignments. Seem uneasy about going to school, of course, and withdraw from friends and family. These are those tried and true examples of things that indicate that something is happening to our child. We couple that with a disinterest or nervousness around technology or being forced to engage with others virtually. It's time to have a conversation and investigate a little further. So how can we help? As always, offer your support and problem solve together. Be that trusted adult. Consider saving the evidence. NCMEC says consider saving the evidence. Belinda says save the evidence. Take that screenshot, print it out, do what you can to make sure that we can help this child find resolution. Encourage the child to block cyberbullies and set up new accounts. Talk to the school. You are the school. Most districts in Texas already have a zero tolerance policy, but those policies certainly need to reflect trends as they change and become more virtual, and report to the cyber tip line. We only have a couple more minutes. We do have some information on how you can recognize cyberbullies in some of the behavior of your students. One thing that's not listed here that I'll share, and then I'll move on. They're laughing a lot while they're online. You know, a lot of times, you know, they're doing this because they want a reaction. If they're laughing, it's time to stop and say, what's so funny? Just as you would in the classroom, this may be an easy way to find that something is going on and someone's being hurt. These are some ways you can prevent it. Again, it's all about talking about that discussion about how their online behavior is an extension of their offline, discuss those expectations and consequences. And as adults, we've got to model that online behavior as well. We can talk about not being a bystander, encourage them to report it to you and to the cyber tip line. And as I mentioned, more and more children are gaming, and that is becoming an issue as well. And again, I'm going through this very quickly because we've run out of time. Technology can't communicate everything, so we've got to communicate with our children, or cannot catch everything. We have tons of resources and free training available, and I am now can point you to it in the chat box as well. And I'm sorry we've run out of time. Publications, you name it, we've got it. It's all free of charge. I can be your point person. Shoot me an email. We can put that in the chat box as well, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you so much for your time and for your hard work and commitment to our children.
Great, Belinda, thank you so much for that excellent information. Everybody, I think we need to bring Belinda back. And I think we need to provide some more time for her to answer questions and to take a deeper dive into some of this content. So if that's something that you'd like, please just say yes in the chat. And we will find some time, because I think we just need to take a deeper dive with the content. And it may be outside of our traditional webinar series time. And we have all of you in your emails, or we might bring her back on a Friday, first Friday of the month. So we'll look at that. Yes. Belinda, excellent. I am so grateful that you are speaking into these important topics, and that NCMEC is leading and providing guidance that we just desperately need in our culture and our society on these really important topics. So thank you for today. You all have Belinda's name and her contact information. We also have a QR code at the end of the deck, and I don't know if we can maybe pop that back up, but would like to get your feedback. You could just take a screenshot of the QR code and provide us feedback as we build out this webinar series.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And what I wanted to, we also have autism and sensory, materials available to communicate. We don't want to forget that, our most vulnerable children also are learning online and need to have access to this information as well. Bilingual materials. I'm also bilingual and can present in Spanish. So many other things I wanted to share, but I think we covered a lot and provided an excellent foundation. Please reach out to me at any time. I am here to help. And my personal phone number is listed. I am working virtually. Call or text anytime. I'm happy to help.
Great. Thanks so much, Belinda. We'll definitely have you back. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you all.
Okay. Bye-bye.